Hi, so this week I wanted to talk to you a little bit about um, a little bit more about the prompt and then go into two elements that we're going to be looking for in this essay. One is counterargument and concession. So we're going to look at the unit a little bit, the prompt, and look at the schedule, and then we'll talk about counterargument concession. And I'm also going to show you how to access the library databases for College of San Mateo. And these are the databases I'm going to want you to use for your research. This next essay is a research project. So we're going to be thinking about all the things we learned about stereotyping from Whistling Vivaldi, adding to some of that, and then thinking also about the parts of Between the World and Me where Coates talks about the profiling that went on with Prince Jones, his friend, before his death, and then also consider sort of currently what's going on with profiling. And so we want to look at this idea of why does racial profiling happen? Why is it so dangerous, and how can we decrease it? So in doing that, we want to look at types of profiling and make a distinction between racial profiling, criminal profiling. So the different types of where it typically happens would be like on the streets, walking in neighborhoods. In neighborhoods that are such as big cities, there tends to be a higher criminalization of low-level crimes like blocking pedestrian traffic and such things where they use racial profiling in order to increase the number of arrests in an area to meet a quota. And that tends to happen in big cities like New York and Chicago. And there's been a lot of criticism of these practices, but they haven't been completely eliminated. Another type is around U.S. border states. There are laws that allow any cop, not just Border Patrol, but any cop to stop someone that they are suspicious of being illegal. So that's basically like, driving while brown. But it's particularly around the border states, it's bad if you are of Latin American descent, Mexican or Latin American descent. And then just generally while driving, there was a big study done in North Carolina, and there's been some others, that if you are African American or dark skin, Mexican, Middle Eastern, and driving, the likelihood of you getting pulled over is much higher. And then, however, the realities as far as what they find in a car, like if they do a search, the drugs and all of that, is normally much more apt to find it in someone who's white. So, so it's basically the racial profiling is not effective in this case. Airports, there's concerns around terrorism, particularly people who are Muslim or who someone believes to be Muslim. That group, even though it's such a small percentage of people who are terrorists, that group tends to get targeted for racial profiling. Then we also have it in stores, like while shopping, getting followed while shopping, or people not opening stores to you. That's happened to some famous African Americans recently. And then also in schools, we look at issues of resource officers. These are officers that are cops that are trained minimally. They're not fully cops, and then they're put into schools and often given weapons and put in a position of power. And so we want to take a look at the profiling that happens there. So the prompt you're answering is a picture of Sandra Bland here. And she was pulled over by cops for missing a turn signal and then harassed. And when taken in, when she kind of talked back to a cop, he threatened to shoot her. And then when taken into custody, she died in custody 2 days later, and it was under suspicious circumstances. They said she committed suicide. Anyway, the prompt here looks at what you're going to be focusing on. You're going to do a lot of research. You're going to be looking at outside sources in addition to the ones we've looked at already. You're going to research one aspect of racial profiling, its origins, causes, legality, ethics, or consequences. So you're going to use one or two cases to analyze and discuss potential solutions and alternatives for racial profiling. And you want to take aside, basically, your paper should focus on, do you believe racial profiling is effective and or moral, and maybe make some recommendations for changes. And you want one case in particular that's analyzed in one or more that's analyzed in your essay. So the sources are going to be Whistling Vivaldi, chapters 5, 6, and 8. 7's okay too, but I think 5, 6, and 8 are sufficient. 2 newspaper articles that I've put on the shell that are regarding racial profiling. I want you to read those. Whether you use them or not is up to you. And then 5 to 6 sources that you find using the database. So for now, we're going to go into looking at issues of concession and counterargument. Concession is sort of a strategy that you can use while arguing in order to make your stance seem more balanced and less biased. And to concede means to give away something. And so what the strategy is you offer and suggest and admit there's merit to your opposition's point of view in some way, in some small way. It increases your credibility with your audience, you seem more balanced, and it kind of helps open up your audience to your viewpoint. You should also try to use a dependent clause structure with this, and we'll take a look at some, but where you de-emphasize the good of the other side and then you return to your side very quickly. Here's 2 examples. There's a dependent clause 1 and one with a semicolon. You can look these over. I've chosen through all my examples here to look at issues of airport security, but you can choose any topic. You can see that these concessions admit that there might be some aspect of the claim that has some truth to it, but then focuses on why that might not be legitimate or why we need to disregard it in some way. The second approach that can be used is a little more intense in the sense of taking on an argument of the opposition. So in doing this, it enhances your ethos, your credibility, and it also makes you seem more balanced, and it helps your readers or detractors stick with your argument if they believe you're addressing their concerns before they have a chance to respond. So there's 3 steps. You turn against some aspect of your argument to challenge it, and then you turn back to reaffirm. And so when you do this, you include 1 or more disadvantages or practical drawbacks to what you propose, like maybe what's the criticism that people may give you, and then you go for an alternate explanation or proposal that makes more sense, that actually addresses those issues. So the first stage is the turn against. A different conclusion could be drawn. An assumption is like assumption that's unwarranted. A key term might be used unfairly. A certain evidence is ignored or played down. Those are some ways to turn against. It might have phrases like it might seem like, or it's true that. And then when you switch to the alternative explanation, you're going to say, but how about this, or but what about this? And you'll kind of give the opposite view. When you return back to your argument, you want to then have this phrase, maybe something like a contrast, nevertheless, but yet, and then you want to refute this idea. Why is it mistaken? Is there an apparent but not real problem? Maybe another reason you return is you acknowledge the validity, but suggest why it's less important, or concede its force, restating your thesis more exactly or qualified or nuanced way. So you want to maybe show what ostensibly is the problem, but then focus on why it isn't true, that counter argument. Where can you put it? A lot of places. You can make it as part of the introduction if you want to just briefly kind of address it early. You can use it as a section of a paragraph or just after your introduction, where you lay out the expected reaction before you get to your points. I kind of like putting it there, to be honest, but everyone has their own preference, and it's up to you and what you think your audience will anticipate. You can also just make a short, quick move within a paragraph to kind of show the other side briefly. And then the other one is you could make it just before the conclusion, especially if it's not one that you think is going to hinge your argument, but that is something that might be on the mind of your reader. Whatever you do, use this sparingly. You don't want to bring up counter arguments a lot in your essay. So here's an example. A claim could be behavioral profiling has proven effective for identifying suspected terrorists. And then the counter step, it may be tempting then to combine ethnic and behavioral profiling or racial and behavior profiling in airports. And then you would turn back and say, however, research proves that it's not necessary to use ethnic profiling. In fact, since terrorists often don't have criminal records and though they may be profiled, they tend to go to great lengths to alter their physical appearance in airports. So that kind of shows you the steps that could be involved in making a counter argument, which is more extended than a concession, which is admitting some aspect of the opposition's benefit. So the last thing I wanted to review with you is some details about how to get into the research database. So we're going to look here for a second at how to get in. If I can get this to work here. So this is when you go to College of San Mateo database, this is what comes up, College of San Mateo library database. The first one is a good one to use. It's Academic Search Premier EBSCO. This is kind of the big general database. What's nice about doing this rather than Googling things is that you can find peer-reviewed articles. Now, for the actual case, you're going to find regular news articles like in USA Today. So this is the area where you want to try to find your other sources. These would be theoretical articles, articles that will help you do your research. So I'm not sure if this will work or not here. I'm doing this from home, but it might not connect. But when you go in here, you'll actually do a search where you put in keywords and then you can look up these sources. Looks like it's struggling to get through. I'll send you some screenshots of this a little later so you can see it. But basically you want to choose full text and you want to do some searches and narrow them down maybe by date or by type of source. And then just breeze through and see. What's nice is there's no ads and you get sources that are peer-reviewed in this place, but clearly it's not working. So you do want to just click on here, the Academic Search Premier, and that's a good place to go from. Okay. If you have more questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, you know, good luck on getting started on the research, and I'll answer any questions you have regarding it as you move forward.